Welcome to Inside Coverage. Charles Robinson, I'm Jason Fitz. I'm in for Andrew Siciliano, hanging out tonight. Lot to get to, C-Rob, because it's been a wild couple of days. First and foremost, good to hang out with you, buddy. I'll be honest, I didn't think that the trade deadline was going to give us great drama, and it turned out to be a wild day yesterday. And then the news didn't really stop. We'll get into some of the trade drama, after effects, but let's get to some of the breaking news right out of the gates, right? Like Kyler Murray at this point has been put on injured reserve. That is the big news, as it means that he's gone for at least 4 games. So, a lot to break down here. First and foremost, is Kyler's time with the Cardinals, in your mind, just done?
You know, it's a long season. I was a little surprised, honestly, that Jonathan Gannon came out and said, hey, if he was healthy, we're going with Jacoby Brissett, at this point at quarterback. But then to move him to IR, I think the way that's being absorbed across the league is they're taking him off the field the best they can to make sure he's not going to be injured. And the thought process now being, okay, well, it's got to be at least 4 games. Most teams, I think, now believe it'll be through the rest of the season, this mid-foot sprain that has put him on IR. And that is simply to avoid, some sort of an injury situation if you were in practice. I mean, bottom line, if he gets injured between now and the end of the season, there's a chance that this guy, they're on the hook for next year as well. I think right now, for all intents and purposes, it appears he's done. But as I said before, Jacoby Brissett still has to play out the rest of the season. There still have to be other quarterback options out there that they've settled on. It feels like this is an indication that they've already done that. But we felt like this was a referendum year for Kyler, and he's run into many of the same problems that he's had previously. And one of them, frankly, inside the Cardinals, when you talk to them, is health. Can he be healthy for the expanse of a season and get into a rhythm as a quarterback? And once again, that did not happen this year. So in some ways, I think this is kind of landed where many thought it would ultimately land. I don't know that there's a team out there that would trade for Kyler at this point. But again, let's see how quarterback situations play out elsewhere. I just don't think the money that's remaining on his contract is something another team would want to acquire. So I believe we're headed toward the Cardinals cutting him, designating him a post-June 1st cut, and then just splitting the cap hit over the 26 and 27 seasons.
What I struggle with on this is just trying to figure out what Kyler Murray's value to the NFL is. It would be because what you're saying makes so much sense. There's always going to be quarterback needy teams in the offseason. And I'm trying to figure out if one of them is going to take a flyer on Kyler Murray, because certainly we have seen good from Kyler Murray and we've seen really bad. So this is that thing you and I talked about before in the past. We use this sort of term of well, he sucks. It's not that simple. There has to be some market value for Kyler Murray in my mind, but also see, Rob, is there? Because it just hasn't taken off the way anybody hoped it would for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's been years, really, since he's played at the level where we thought, okay, he's justified, the number 1 overall selection. He justified moving off of Josh Rosen after one season, although I guess you would say Josh Rosen justified that by dropping out of the NFL fairly quickly. What I think is interesting, though, is as recently as a year ago, and going into the deadline a year ago, I talked to a team in the AFC. And their quarterback situation was resolved, but I knew in the past their front office had an admiration for the skill set that Kyler brought to the table. And I remember having a conversation with the GM, and I said, will this guy have value if at some point the what was then kind of the new regime of the Cardinals with Jonathan Gannon, the head coach, and GM Monty Ossenfort, if they wanted to move off of him, will he have value? And the GM said to me, he said, yeah. He said, I think the bottom line of Kyler is he's still got athletic traits that are special. He still throws a great ball. He's still got the ability to scramble with his legs and make plays. The things that the Cardinals fell in love with and made him the number 1 overall pick, Steve Keim, the general manager at that time, they're still there. It's just, can Kyler stay healthy and become a consistent player? And as you and I have talked about in the past, that's never happened. He has not stayed healthy. He has not become a consistent player, and we have not seen the growth in the Cardinals offense. And I talked to Cardinals OC Drew Petzing in the training camp, he and I sat down and we talked about that offense. And he was very upfront about it. He said, look, one of the things, we didn't change much on offense. He said, if you look at our personnel on offense in 2025, it's not really different than 2024. He said, but, two things really need to happen for us to take a big stride forward. He said, number one, Marvin Harrison Jr. has got to continue to grow into that number one wide receiver spot. And then he said, Kyler has to be healthy and then get into the rhythm and take the big step that we expect. That will also help Marvin Harrison Jr. grow as a player. Didn't happen. And frankly, Marvin Harrison Jr., I feel like has looked like, or at least in this last game, looked like the player we expected with Jacoby Brissett throwing the ball. I think the coaching staff noticed that. I think Drew Petzing noticed that the offense plays better with Jacoby Brissett on the field. And that's how you ultimately, landed where we are. It doesn't mean Jacoby Brissett's going to be their long-term answer at quarterback. It just means he's the quarterback they feel can get them to winning now.
Is that a smart strategy, though? Like, this is the moment where, look, Jacoby Brissett's 32 years old. He's probably not your long-term answer at the quarterback. Right. So then you're Arizona. It's like, congratulations, huzzah. You're going to go out and win some games because you got Jacoby as your quarterback, which might help save your coaching staff. I hear that. But also, it's going to put you further and further away from any sort of shooting distance to get a quarterback if you want one in the draft. Most draft pundits are already telling you there's only a couple that are going to be available. So now all of a sudden you've won enough games that you're not really going to be able to easily find a replacement. There's not really a street guy that you're looking at and saying, hey, let's go take a flyer on a Daniel Jones like that. That doesn't really exist that we see today as we stand. So, like, I get this from the Cardinals standpoint of, hey, we got to win some games. I understand. But also, C-Rob, I kind of don't, because you're going to win just enough games to not get an answer at quarterback in the offseason.
Well, without getting into a full-fledged 2026 draft conversation, there's differing opinions on the quarterback class. Like, there's some people you talk to and they say, hey, there could be as many as 5 first-round picks. By the time we go through the vetting process, everybody, works out for teams. We get through the combine and then visits. Teams could feel good enough that there are 5 potential first-round quarterbacks. The question is, are there 5 teams in the first round that need a quarterback? That might not necessarily be the case. And in that kind of a scenario, regardless of how many games the Cardinals win, if you slide down in the first round and it feels like, hey, there are 5 guys worthy of being first-round picks, they could have a shot. They could also engineer their way to try and move up in the draft and get a quarterback. They spent, their entirety of their draft and really their last offseason was piled into that defense. So I think there's no question from an ownership and a front office standpoint, the next offseason is going to be very much about developing that offense and pouring some assets into it. So I don't think they would feel bad about trying to engineer a way to go get the quarterback they think they need if they see the one they want in the draft. So there's that aspect of it. And then there's you look at, let's say, Seattle, you look at Indianapolis, and you say, okay, well, teams are giving more consideration to, for lack of a better term, the recycled guys that could be out there. Like, is there a veteran who got off to a rough start in his career and has rejuvenated himself and gives us that tool on the table to potentially go out and get this guy? You could keep Jacoby Brissett as a bridge into a young player if you draft a quarterback, just like he was a bridge to Drake May in New England. Or you could say, let's take a look at Mac Jones. He's doing great things under Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. We've seen these quarterbacks, both Sam Darnold and Mac Jones, go through the San Francisco system. They settle down. Mac Jones has thrown, I'll say this for Mac Jones in San Francisco, he's thrown a very precise ball. He's done a great job of having, just ball placement, not a huge arm, but for what he is, I think he's really sort of reached that ceiling under Kyle Shanahan or showed you that he's got some ceiling with the 49ers. So if you're the Cardinals, you're sitting there going, probably not going to trade him inside the division. I would think you don't, if you're the San Francisco 49ers, we don't want to give Mac Jones to another NFC West team, but I think you at least check. And the 49ers do have another year of Mac Jones under contract, so that complicates things, I think, for the Cardinals. Not like it's a Sam Darnold situation where he's going to go out there and be a free agent. But I do think you eye maybe some other veteran options and say, is that a tool we have, on the table moving forward?
It's way too early to break down draft quarterbacks. I would just tell you this quick story. Yeah. I was prepping for Yahoo Sports Daily. I was prepping for it, and I was like, all right, we were going to be talking about the draft, like who could save a franchise. So I did my usual, as we always do the draft together, right? I blasted out a text to a bunch of guys that I think are pretty smart. And I was like, okay, who knows? Right before I went to bed, the first 3 responses I got were like, no, there are 3 guys that are very legitimate. Absolutely. 3 guys that are going to be first rounders. It's great. I was like, boom, perfect. The next morning I woke up, the next 3 texts I got while I was sleeping were all, no, there isn't a single guy that I would take in the first. So I went from 3 surefire first rounds to 3 I don't knows, like same responses. So it's going to be a wild, like the draft this year is going to be a wild piece to figure out. That being said, we're talking about trading Kyler. Let's go to somebody that was traded. Sauce Gardner was traded, but there's an interesting element to Sauce Gardner being traded that maybe we haven't paid enough attention to. And see, Rob, you dug into this a little bit because one thing that we're not used to seeing, I think most of us were pretty shocked, you don't see a mega deal followed by almost an immediate trade without just salary cap hell. What did the Jets figure out that the rest of us need to learn from?
Yeah, so what's interesting with Sauce Gardner, so when this trade went down, I thought in my mind, I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Sauce Gardner just signed, an extension with with the New York Jets, and you don't see a guy sign an extension and then 3 months later he gets traded. And the reason for that is most of the extensions that get signed nowadays, most of the contract structures out there, you see teams are doing massive signing bonuses. And the reason you do the massive signing bonus is that you spread out a lot of the guaranteed money in that contract over the expanse of years. So let's say you go out there and you say, all right, we're going to sign a quarterback to a 5-year deal. Realistically, when you break it down, it's really only a 3-year deal. But because we give them a 5-year deal and because we award a massive signing bonus, we can then take that chunk of money. So let's say we give them $100 million signing bonus. We now split that signing bonus up over the length of the 5 years. He might not be here the entirety of the 5 years, but it gives us wiggle room to take $100 million and go 20 million, 20 million, 20 million, 20 million, 20 million over the 5 increments. What the Jets did with Sauce Gardner's extension, instead of giving him a massive signing bonus, they basically gave him, roster bonuses. They gave him a smaller signing bonus. They gave him guaranteed money in different ways that will be absorbed by a team that trades for him. Now, the trade-off here for the Jets is when they did that, it makes them easier to trade, but in some ways it makes them slightly less attractive to teams that are bringing him on. When you trade a guy who's got a signing bonus and it's been split up over a number of years, all that money accelerates. The team who's trading him away takes that massive cap hit. And so you're onboarding a player, but you're onboarding him at salaries that are very attractive to you because that team took the brunt of the cap hit by all the accelerated signing bonus money that was split up. It didn't happen with the Jets. Effectively, the Jets said, hey, look, you're going to come for Sauce Gardner at some point. I'm sure they weren't thinking, hey, it's going to happen in 2025. But if you're going to come for him in 2026, you're going to be taking on the remainder of what his real contract is. And I talked to a general manager about this, and he said, it might, with some of these younger general managers being so active, he said, there's this massive influx of young general managers who are very open to doing deals. They're very open to having conversations on even younger players. If you're bringing a huge draft compensation package to the table, being open to that kind of conversation, he essentially said, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these young general managers now start to structure the contracts that they sign in a manner that's similar to this. Now, the Spot Track did a breakdown, and I think we've got the post up here on X of what Sauce Gardner's cap hits are for the Colts. It's $625,000 in 2025, $9.5 million in 2026. Now, really, the extension kicks in realistically in 2027, $20.9 million in 2027, $26.2 million in 2028, $36.1 million in 2029 and 2030. So what you see is it's the Colts realistically who have to pay out the bulk of what that extension is really going to cost. But I just think it's interesting if younger general managers like to trade, start to structure contracts where they don't spread out the money with these signing bonuses. It gives them the ability to be more active at the trade deadline with a Sauce Gardner, with, let's say, if they had done the Quinnen Williams deal this way. Now, Quinnen Williams, it was more of a traditional deal. It's just he's further into it than Sauce was. But I think the flexibility aspect of this with a James Gladstone in Jacksonville, who has shown he loves to trade, a Howie Roseman, even being a veteran, Howie likes to be active. And I think some of these general managers could look at this and say, let's start to do contracts a little bit differently. Let's not spread the money out. Let's be a little more cap conscious, and it'll give us the ability to move players really whenever we want to, if the right opportunity presents itself.
Man, I'm just wired to always wonder why. So the first thing you say when I realize this contract's put together this way is like, why? What did the Jets see? Like, is this a moment where we need to step back and maybe give the Jets some credit and say, hey, they extended a player, but also gave themselves the opportunity to realize very quickly that things were a disaster and they needed to rip it down to the studs and do a massive rebuild. Like, maybe that's lucky. Better to be lucky than good. Or maybe that's incredible foresight to say, hey, we're going to lock him up, but we're also going to protect ourselves in case quickly we figure out that Justin Fields isn't the guy that this roster needs to be completely ripped down to the studs. To leave yourself the flexibility to do that is either a beautiful accident or it's brilliant.
Yeah, and you wonder, the general manager there, Darren Muji, who just came aboard this year. Well, where does he come over from? He comes over from the Denver Broncos. And, I have to think there were lessons learned with the Russell Wilson contract, right? When you do these massive deals and you split up the money in a way that so much of it can accelerate. Now with the quarterbacks, so much of it is guaranteed early in those deals anyway, that if you're going to try and do a quarterback extension, then move off it after a year or two, no matter what, you're going to get killed, right? It's a salary cap hit. But I think it does make you think critically when you go through something like that, when you're sitting there and you're saying, how could we at least protect ourselves a little more on the back end? And the way to do that clearly is to not try to spread out guaranteed money into years when the player won't be there. I mean, almost every player in the NFL who signs, let's say, a 5-year deal at this stage, very few of them live out that 5-year deal. And almost all of them are getting decent signing bonuses, which means almost all of them have some kind of accelerated cap hit if it goes poorly in the first year or two of that extension. So I think teams getting a little more smart about I think it's teams getting a little smarter about how the cap functions, about the landscape that they currently reside in as general managers and front offices, that, hey, there are trades. There are people who will come calling about your cornerback when he looks like, hey, he's a young building piece and you're rebuilding, but we're willing to overspend. Be prepared to potentially move off this. And I'll give you this on Sauce Gardner. It's kind of interesting to me. The Sauce Gardner deal did not develop over a long period of time. It happened fast. I'm talking from the point it was consummated, it wasn't even, I think, on the minds of the Jets 24 hours before that. That's how fast this really came together for the Jets in like a realistic, tangible, hey, we're going to trade Sauce Gardner kind of way. It wasn't something that was cooking over a long period of time. Quinnen Williams, maybe it was a little bit different. They knew Quinnen was unhappy. He'd expressed frustration at losing. I think they felt, and Quinnen felt, maybe it's time for me to start, looking elsewhere. That was not the thought process from the franchise on Sauce Gardner. But again, the way that they structured that deal, I think they did it that way for a reason, to give themselves some flexibility, maybe after year one, maybe after year two, probably not before it kicks in, probably not 3 months later, but this is the environment they found themselves in. And ultimately, I think it kind of worked out for them, because the draft haul they got, I can tell you, other teams were very, very shocked at the amount of capital that the Colts gave up for Sauce.
I got idiots in fantasy football leagues with me that need 4 or 5 days just to think about a fantasy football trade, and they got Sauce Gardner done in a day. Like, this is where we are as a world. You mentioned the haul that they got back. We have to read into that, right? The Colts giving up multiple first-round draft picks, first and foremost, tells you that they are set at the quarterback position, right? As an organization, they must believe that Daniel Jones is the long-term answer. We can say that definitively today?
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't trade away 2 first-round picks when you're sitting there and going, hey, okay, we're in good shape this year. We got this window, but it's only a 1-year window. I just don't believe that. You don't add a Sauce Gardner, and with the intent of clearly having him around for a few years, and then not give yourself some outs at the quarterback position. And they really don't. They don't have outs at the quarterback position now that they don't have first round picks. I mean, if you're going to trade for someone, you got to have some decent capital if it's going to be a good quarterback that you're going to go and deal for. Maybe the Mac Jones conversation could ultimately be had if the Daniel Jones situation goes south. But I would say that this very much strengthens the resolve of the team to commit to Daniel Jones long term. I think what's going to be interesting is to see how do they go about this. Are they working on an extension with Daniel Jones now? Or do they say, let's see how the rest of the season unfolds? You think about the Minnesota Vikings last year. Sam Darnold's playing great, but I think they wanted to see how it ended, how he finished a season before they really thought about a real tangible, significant long-term commitment. It didn't end well. And I think that's why Sam Darnold's playing in Seattle right now. I would be surprised that the Colts are not going to take a look at Daniel Jones through the remainder of the season and then look at a franchise tag and say, we can always tag him and continue to negotiate a long-term extension under the tag. To do anything else at this point, some people are out there saying, well, there's a Daniel Jones extension incoming quickly. Unless it's a very affordable, attractive extension that really works for the team. And I'm thinking like you're talking about a low salary. I don't want to say low salary, but if it's a $35 million a year extension, okay. That's probably doable. But if you get anything north of that, I would think the Colts want to have that additional data through the end of the season, maybe into the playoffs to see, is this real? And let's not forget, Daniel Jones is coming off a game where he turned the ball over 5 times. It's probably, look, it's one game. It's one game, right? It doesn't automatically turn him back into, the guy that the New York Giants are willing to walk away from. But again, I think it gives you pause. You want to see a little more before you make that commitment.
Well, and I just need to remind everybody, Daniel Jones is 28 years old. Like, it feels like we've been talking about him for 15 years. Forever. He's 28, right? Like, if they found their quarterback, in theory, they could get it, another decade out of Daniel Jones. So, like, there's a real opportunity here. But I don't think it's the worst strategy, C-Rob, to look at it and say, hey, this is going really well, and I really like dating you, but before we get married, let's just take our time, right? Like, before you go in and make any long-term, I don't think it's a bad strategy if they end up having to franchise him. Like, being patient as an organization when you have a quarterback that's having unparalleled success in his career is not a bad thing to me.
And not to be a downer here, but the Steelers last year started 7-2. Right. And the thought process inside the building, and Russ was playing well enough after he took over for Justin Fields that the Steelers thought, we got our quarterback between one of these two guys. Like, either it's going to be Russ, who we think is playing well enough right now that he could be our long-term starter. Or if this somehow comes apart, we still have a lot of faith in Justin Fields and he could ultimately be our starter. Now, so they start 7-2. From that point on, the rest of the season, they go 3-5. They finish 10-7. They lose in the first round of the playoffs. And both of those guys walk in free agency. So I'm as hyped as anybody about the 7-2 start of the Colts. I'm as hyped as anybody about the fact that they went out and got Sauce Gardner and they're really pushing for this. But again, if you look at the league in 9-game increments and just go back season by season, you will see there's always a team that starts really, really well and then kind of slides as the season goes on. And that slide ends up affecting how they feel about certain persons on their roster, often the quarterback.
Yeah, well, we always say that this show is the how and the why of all things NFL. Like, the how and the why matters for quarterbacks. How the season ends, why it ends. There's a difference between I lost an epic game to Mahomes with 12 seconds left where I walked off the field with the lead, or I went into Kansas City and threw 6 picks and we lost, right? Like, all of these things are going to impact however the Colts feel moving forward. That being said, It right now today, I think we all agree, like, this feels like a glorious story. Everybody's rooting for this to work out. See, Rob, I just think being a little patient in the process, like, I think the Colts have played this whole thing perfectly. I have no problem.
I agree.
If you want to say F them picks when you are in this Super Bowl window like they are, when you're ahead, I think this was really well done by them. All right, we got a lot to break down over the course of the show. Coming up next, Andrew Siciliano had the chance to talk to Derrick Henry. You'll hear some of that, and we'll get you some updates on some play calling changes in Cleveland. That's all coming next on Inside Coverage. Welcome back to Inside Coverage. Yesterday, Andrew Siciliano had the chance to talk to Ravens superstar Derrick Henry. We want you to see it. Check it out.
It is great to have this guy on the show. We have royalty on the show today. On behalf of State Farm, he is the King Henry, Derrick Henry. of the Ravens on Inside Coverage. How are you, man? Good to see you.
I'm doing good, Andrew. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. And I think things, I assume, are doing better there. After the Dolphins game, you said vibes are high after 2 wins in 5 days. How high are the vibes, Derrick?
Yeah, man. We know it's not easy to win in this league, and we've had a rough go, through the season. But coming off of 2 straight wins, your vibes are high. Vibes are high, and we just want to continue to build off that. The focus is being 1-0 each week. Happy to get everybody back and everybody healthy, and just keep this thing rolling through the preparation.
The follow-up, the obvious follow-up here is how bad were the vibes?
No, the vibes weren't bad, but we just had to fight through it, get through it, with one another. We're a team. We all represent one another, and we knew that we were off to a rough start, wanting how we wanted to start. Some guys went down. Everybody just had to get back, and get back into the flow of things. We knew at some point that'll happen, and we're excited to see what's to come. But just being present in the moment and being focused on what we need to get done.
Yeah, injuries clearly were part of this, and no one was pretending otherwise. I was talking to Kyle Hamilton. He was on this show a couple of weeks ago, right as you guys were getting to the bye, and he said that you guys have to get your swagger back. Is it safe to say the swagger is back?
Oh yeah, I mean the swag is definitely back. And we want to keep it going, and we feel like we're getting back to what we know we can do, and to our style of play and our style of football, and doing what we want to do as a team. We know it's a long road, and still a lot to be done. But it's like I said, just focus week after week, and just be excited, just embrace it, man. This football, it's what we do.
And I know you were excited for the mini bye. For pull back the curtain here. You guys hate Thursdays. I mean, I'm sure you love the national stage, but Thursdays are rough on the body. But the mini bye, as everybody calls it, like the ability to sit on your couch mid-season right after you had a bye, by the way, is great. I work for the Browns in my free time. Did you spend, and they were on a bye, did you spend your Sunday on the couch like me, rooting against the Steelers and the Bengals?
I'm always happy when they don't win. But I didn't put my whole focus on the Bengals and the Steelers. But it's nice to enjoy my Sunday. I was with my kids, running around with them in the house. But I would see the Steelers beat the Colts, and the Bengals lost a tough one. So the weekend was good, but it was like So yeah, man.
I get you. Like I honestly turned the Bengals game off. Like I had the 4 box on, and I'm like, all right, that one's over. I turned it off, and then my phone started blowing up. Like, turn it back on. Like
that game was crazy.
Yeah, that game was. I don't know you're ever going to see another game like that. You guys have had some wild games. Everyone's seen some wild games, but like I mean, the back and forth in the final
back and forth.
Absolutely absurd. All right, you're smiling here. I went back and looked at your press conference after the Bears game, and you're pretty stoic. That's your thing, talking to the media after the game, but you did smile a little bit when you were asked about passing Walter Payton on the all-time rushing touchdown list. What did that mean to you, Derrick?
Yeah, just like a surreal moment. For my name to be mentioned with Walter Payton, somebody who's like a superhero at the position, somebody that I grew up hearing about, watching NFL films, and admiring his story, his journey, his life. Just something that as a kid, you dream of happening, and for it to happen, you just feel so blessed.
All right, I'm going to give you some more history here, some more dreams. And you and I were talking before we started this. That's a Jim Brown Syracuse helmet right here. You are, as we sit here today, Derrick, 17th on the all-time rushing list. I'd say you're like 2 good games, like 2 classic Derrick Henry $150 games away from jumping all the way up to 11. And if you do that, you pass Jim Brown. And then, you really kill it in the second half. You get like 680 in the second half of the year, which is doable. You're passing Tony Dorsett, you're top 10. Will you allow, what would that mean to you? Will you allow yourself to go there?
Maybe after the season, while I'm playing, I don't try to I haven't really thought about it too much. Like I haven't even gave it no thought at all. Really, I think because I'm just so focused on what I need to do, me being better, trying to be, trying to be the best teammate I can be. But I think when it's all said and done, when the season's done, I have time to look back on it. But you saying those names is just like, wow, I can't even believe, that's even possible for real, honestly, if I'm being honest.
It's possible, man. You're almost there. You're knocking on the door, and the Ravens are knocking on the door, making a run here as well. I'm not in any way overlooking the Vikings. It seems like though week in, week out, people are focused more on all the other stuff than it is on who you're actually playing this week. Like they focused on ping pong tables and taking the video games out of the locker room and all that. Did we make too much of that, Derrick?
Yeah, I think everybody made it a big deal, but at the same time, we going through a rough batch there. Have a little adversity, so any story coming out, something like that is, we know it comes with the territory. But we didn't make a big deal out of it. We backed Lamar when he won everything out, so we can focus on doing our jobs and letting all the games and stuff go, because that's what we needed to do, and that's what's required for us to do. And we was all behind it, but we knew everybody else would make a big deal about it, but we didn't really.
You any good at ping pong?
I'm not. I'm not a ping pong player. I don't even play games or anything like that, so no, that's my thing.
Yeah, you're strictly business, and the business this week is the Vikings. I'm sure when you're watching football on Sunday, you saw what Brian Flores did to Jared Goff and the way they were bringing the pressure, as he always does. You never know where that pressure is coming from against the Vikings, but big part of that game was not allowing Jahmyr Gibbs to get out of the backfield, right, and get into the flat and get into open space. You guys have a very different running game, but my point is, he was really stressed last week. They put so much in the protection game on him. When you look at the Vikings defense, what do you think they're going to do to you guys this week? Like, where's the curveball?
I just think their scheme is their scheme, and they're gonna continue to do what they are good at, and that gives them much success. Each week is gonna have some tweaks where they try to bring something new, have some packages. But at the end of the day, he's gonna trust and believe in his scheme and what he does, and the players that he has. But I don't think we try to make it too much, get too far ahead of ourselves as far as the preparation part. Just take it day by day. They're a good team. They've been a great team in the Lions, and we know we have our hands full. So preparation is going to be key for us, and being locked in all week, just so we're ready for whatever he throws at us on Sunday.
Derrick Henry, Baltimore Ravens, on their way to play the Vikings this week. Always appreciate you. Thanks for being here, man, on behalf of State Farm, and good luck the rest of the way.
Appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you for having me, man.
Great stuff from Andrew. Great stuff from Derrick Henry. Always appreciate his time when he gives it to us. Yahoo Sports, always awesome. Let's get into some of the other news happening right now in the NFL, and we have some changes coming in Cleveland. Kevin Stefanski is giving up play calling, and the question is, what does that mean for the future of the head coach? All right, and I'm just going to peek behind the curtain here, C-Rob. Mike Goldfarb is our great producer on Yahoo Sports Daily, which you can listen to 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday on Yahoo Sports, yahoosports.tv. Goldfarb is a massive, massive Cleveland fan. Peek behind the curtain. I get every time somebody says that Stefanski could be on the hot seat. Boom. We're like, hey, this reporter said this guy said this insider said this. Goldfarb is always looking for this. So the minute this happened, my first thought was, well, Cleveland fans are going to read into this. Should we be reading into giving up offensive play calling duties for the second straight year as a reason that Kevin Stefanski is actually on the hot seat?
So, look, people will absorb this in different ways. Like some people will look at it and say, okay, he's willing to give up play calling duties, in showing that flexibility, and the team even going down this avenue for the second straight year is an indication that he's probably safe. Like why would you, if you're going through this now and Tommy Rees takes over the play calling duties, and let's say they have, a modest finish, Kevin Stefanski is going to be around. Other people look at it and say, okay, hey, look, it's shown, you don't give up play calling duties 2 straight years and then argue, I'm the offensive coach that you need right now. Things are going great under my, under my regime. And it's hard to argue that when you're giving it up in November of 2024, you're giving it up in November of 2025. I think there's a lot of football to be played. I would say, this isn't great for Kevin Stefanski. It's just not, it's the offense has, once Dylan Gabriel has come in, there have been moments where I think certain play calls, you're like, you scratch your head. There have been certain game, scenarios, game management scenarios where you're like, this doesn't feel like this was, managed well. Anytime you have a rookie quarterback who comes in and throws, like 50 passes in a game, and you go away from Quinshon Judkins, who has been, I think the best rookie running back we've seen out of this class thus far. And you get that out of balance, there's a reason to question it. So I wouldn't say it's a surefire indicator that Kevin Stefanski's gone. I wouldn't say it's a surefire indicator that Kevin Stefanski is going to be here in 2026. I think it's a surefire indication that the coaching staff is on the table for the Browns. I think that they are looking at the second half of the season, and I think this includes the front office, and it includes ownership. They're going to see how this goes, how it functions, how the pieces work together, and ultimately the job that Kevin does, not necessarily having to handle the offensive play calling. And then, now he steps back and he just deals with every other part of functionality, with the Cleveland Browns. I don't think anybody in that building, particularly from the coaching staff, feels safe necessarily heading into the offseason. There's one other thing too that I'll note. I thought was kind of interesting. Andrew Berry historically has spoken with the media during the team's bye week, and he didn't do that this year. And it's the first time Andrew Berry hasn't taken a chance to sit down with the media during the bye week. And I think, and this is just 100% my opinion here, I think part of the reason you would see a general manager do that is because you don't want to have to sit down and be put into a situation where you have to make declarative statements about the future of the organization, where it concerns quarterback, where it concerns the future of your head coach. Andrew Berry would have gotten hammered with those questions during the bye week. And I wonder, when he takes a step back and says, nope, not going to meet with the media, I think it's to allow himself the latitude to make some decisions without, declaring now in the middle of this season, this is where we are, this is where we're going. And hey, Kevin's got a vote of confidence or there's a question here.
The more I've asked smart people like you about what's going on in Cleveland, the more I get a sense of I think there's a bit of a disconnect at times between where an organization thinks they are and where the fans want them to be. Everybody I've talked to, you're far more connected than I'll ever be. Everybody I've talked to has echoed the same thing. Like the Browns organizationally understood they weren't going to be fighting for a playoff spot this year, right? So I think part of that is just measured my expectations. So I'm like, okay, they get what they're doing. I don't know how you can be a 2-time coach of the year and also be so bad that you're giving up play calling for the second straight year. And we're watching Joe Flacco go out and thrive in another offense. I can't make these things align, C-Rob, and that's the hard part for me. It's like there's a logic portion of my brain that says, well, if the Browns knew that they weren't probably going to be great this year anyway, then why disrupt everything? But also, you've got a quarterback that's being successful somewhere else right now that was just garbage on your offense. So that has to mean something, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, it's not great to see Joe Flacco go elsewhere and thrive. Now, that said, when Joe Flacco went to the Cincinnati Bengals, anybody who understood Joe Flacco's skill set looked at the Bengals and said, that's a pretty good fit. You got a guy who he likes to sling it. He likes to throw it deep. The Bengals have, between T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, They got guys who just love to, run a vertical offense. And, even when Joe Flacco came into Cleveland for the first time, we saw the offense get a heck of a lot more vertical. I would not necessarily compare the skill set of the wide receivers in Cleveland to the skill set of the wide receivers with the Cincinnati Bengals.
That is a very fair point, my friend. That is a very fair point.
And I would tell people to keep that in mind too. Like, Joe goes into Cincinnati and all of a sudden he looks great. Well, Joe's playing with basically 2 number 1 wide receivers, and one of the 2 number 1 wide receivers is like 1A, 1B, 1C with Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua in the league in terms of who's the top dog at the wideout spot. And T. Higgins, by the way, when he's healthy and playing at the tippy top of his game, probably maybe a top 10 guy in the NFL. So I think that plays into it. But that said, I still think this is more about Dylan Gabriel. I think it's more about the running game. I think it's more about having balance as an offense with the Cleveland Browns. And, something I will say too, if it does not work out with Kevin Stefanski, I would not say it was not because he didn't get an honest shot this year. I might have argued differently if at the trade deadline, they're just offloading pieces, right? That there's, they're trading. Hey, they're going to trade a starting offensive lineman. Hey, they're going to trade David Njoku. If they had traded some significant pieces off of that offense, then I would have said, okay, well, they kind of made their decision and they bailed on the rest of the season. They didn't. I mean, they retained the talent they had in place, and they're going to have the opportunity to show whether or not they can grow some of these young players into starring roles and point the offense in the right direction by the end of the season. But yeah, I mean, it's rare to see a 2-time coach of the year give up play calling duties twice, and just have the struggle that he's had. But I'll also say it's rare for any coach to deal with the quarterback situation that Kevin Stefanski has dealt with. Even in the Baker Mayfield era, people are like, well, how did they fumble, the Baker Mayfield situation so badly? Baker was not healthy. Okay. For particularly that last year that they had him, he did not play healthy, and he did not play well, and he did not play consistently. Now the year before, when he was healthy, he beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs, on the road. I mean, he played great, and Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year that year. And, I think when he's had the quarterback situation settled, healthy, and with a quality player in that spot, we've seen the results that he's, I mean, he delivered with Flacco when Flacco stepped in the first time for the Cleveland Browns. So to me, I still wonder what does Kevin Stefanski look like with a good quarterback who's in there consistently, and he can get a rhythm with him, even as a play caller, like even if he's still keeping play calling duties, because no one else has gone through Deshaun Watson, that type of situation in this league. Kevin Stefanski has. And if I was him, if I was Kevin Stefanski's agent, I would argue to other teams, what did you really expect? Like, how did you expect him to weather that entire scenario?
And let's be clear, there's not a single coach in the league that would go into a season saying, I will save my job with my 3rd or 5th round pick that's a quarterback as a rookie. Right. I'm just saying, right. It won't happen. So who's on the hot seat then? Like, as we go into the back half of this, and be very clear, we shouldn't have to say this, but I will say this. Nobody on this show is ever rooting for anybody to lose their job. Sure. So the question here isn't who's going to get fired. We're not sitting here rolling around in joy with any of it. But the question is, like, who feels a little bit of heat under their seat to get some results as we get into the back half?
Look, I think obviously Mike McDaniel, in Miami, we'll say, I don't want to put Kevin on the hot seat, but we'll say the second half of the season definitely matters for him. Like, if you want to call it the hot seat, we'll call it the hot seat. Mike McDaniel in Miami, there's indications that ownership wants to try to figure out a way to make it work with Mike McDaniel, that maybe by bringing in a different general manager, they might be able to, resurrect his career with the Miami Dolphins. I still think it's going to matter for Mike McDaniel whether the team just feels like it's giving up the rest of this season. I don't think Pete Carroll's on the hot seat in Las Vegas with the Raiders. I do wonder, though, you're going to have to explain, like, where is this going now? Because the one thing that I've been surprised at this season is when you watch Pete Carroll's press conferences, there are times where he feels, especially post-game pressers, he just kind of feels like shocked at the fact that they've had the problems that they've had. He feels stunned at some of the losses that they've incurred, and certainly that the culture did not take root and turn things around more quickly. And frankly, I think there are people across the league too that thought, hey, you know what? Pete's going to get it up and running pretty quickly with the Raiders. That's the kind of coach he is. That's the kind of motivator he is. And it has not happened for the Raiders. Now, maybe they get Brock Bowers back. All of a sudden, the offense changes, becomes a little more dynamic. I mean, obviously, Jacoby Myers went out the door. But I'm very curious to see how, now that Myers is out the door, what they do with some of these other pieces on the roster. DeAndre Thornton is a guy that I'm curious to see what he looks with added snaps, what the offense could look like, with Bowers healthy, if Ashton Genty can become a little more consistent part of that scheme down the stretch. I just wonder, where are we going now with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith and the state of the Raiders? I don't think Pete's on the hot seat, but I think there has to be some sort of tangible plan moving forward on how to get this, right, because it is not right at all.
Well, and look, Pete has said a couple of times that, he's surprised that they've struggled this way. You're right. And I called for it on Daily a few weeks ago. I don't think the timelines match right now. And that's the biggest difficulty I have in trying to figure out how the organization flips around. You need a quarterback at this point because Geno and Chip Kelly just haven't been a good fit. And it's okay to, Chip Kelly's offense really hasn't worked. Geno hasn't been a good fit in it. They're not any closer to being competitive. So now you really are saying, hey, let's reset at the quarterback position. Are you resetting with Pete Carroll at the quarterback position?
Yeah. That's what I'm asking.
That's just, I have a hard time seeing it. I think probably the most viable answer is that we get to the offseason, this thing didn't go very well, and Pete rides off into the sunset in some other role. But also, I don't know. I don't know how you turn around what is a very, very strange year. I didn't have wild expectations, as you know, for this Raiders team, but I did think that they would look competitive, and more often than not, they've looked disjointed and just frankly awful. So that's not indicative of a Pete Carroll team, and I don't think that's easy to turn around. So I'm with you. I would have a hard time seeing a world where Mark Davis turns around and fires Pete Carroll. But I wonder if this season goes wildly off the rails and they don't win any more games, I wonder if Pete says, hey, I'm not doing the best job that I could do, and I'm going to let somebody else take over for me.
That's why I'm hesitant to put Pete in the hot seat category. But when you think about that second half, like what coaches are in the hot seat, the first question I ask myself when I look at the standings and I start to look at teams is, okay, is it not working? Yes, it's not working in Vegas. B, is there clearly a tangible plan in place, with the current head coach? I don't know that we know that, in Las Vegas. And then, C, is that coach fireable right now? And I don't know if the third one really matches up. I don't know that Mark Davis, this doesn't feel like you want to fire Pete Carroll after 1 year. Now, that said, is he committed to Geno? If he is or isn't committed to Geno, what does the future of the quarterback spot look like? How much of this is a rebuild scenario for the Raiders? I can tell you teams are going to come knocking for Max Crosby again in the offseason. They're going to keep asking, like, at some point, are you going to, put this guy on the table because we'll trade for him? And I just, in my mind, I keep staring at Vegas and I'm like, man, this feels like it's further away than maybe we thought. And just how does Pete Carroll fit into that long term? And by the way, his relationship also with Geno Smith, because he clearly backs Geno.
Yeah, and I can't see a world right now where Chip Kelly's back. That's $6 million for an offensive coordinator. $6 million. You're just tossing away. Anybody else, see, Rob, that stands out to you that's hot seated as we sit right now? Is Aaron Glenn safe if the rest of the season just goes?
See, that's it's funny because I was just thinking in my head, like, do we want to have an Aaron Glenn conversation? I don't think Aaron Glenn's on the hot seat, but I think he's in a tough spot now with the Jets because you just traded away two, youngish, like Sauce is young. Okay, Quinnen, Quinnen's going to turn 28, this season, but still a young building block, a player that's got 4 or 5 years of prime easily left in him. And you traded those guys away. And Aaron Glenn's a defensive coach, right? That's his stock in trade. And you've now taken away two cornerstones of that defense. And so I stare at Aaron Glenn and I'm like, well, he's not getting fired. I don't think there's any way he's getting fired after one season, particularly after Woody Johnson came out and put all the onus on Justin Fields and, said nothing but good things about Aaron Glenn. But I do think Aaron Glenn now is in a really tough spot. Now he's got to go through what is a very large rebuild and a rebuild that really needs to go through the 2027 draft, where you have 3 first-round picks in a bumper crop draft. And so you're looking at Aaron Glenn going through a rebuild in 2025, and it's been a rough year. 2026, likely to be a rough year. 2027, maybe not as rough you hope, as some of the elements that you're drafting start to, get into roles, and maybe the 2027 draft class contributes a little more immediately, and you start to turn a corner. It's not a patient world in the NFL. Woody Johnson, I think, particularly since returning from his ambassadorship, I don't think he was very patient with Robert Saleh and the Jets, front office at that point. So I don't think Aaron Glenn's on the hot seat. He'll be fired after 1 year, but I definitely was thinking about him when they recoup all these draft picks. Often we don't see coaches survive hey, let's, trade cornerstone pieces, get a ton of picks, reboot at quarterback. All we do nowadays is see guys fired after drafting quarterbacks, number 1, number 2, number 3. Those head coaches that are in place when you're drafting those guys don't tend to last and see the fruits of that pick.
Now, I'll remind everybody that the Jets have 3 first-round draft picks in 2027, which will make them the first team in the NFL to have 3 first-round draft picks since the Jets in 2022. So how did that work out? So I'm just reminding everybody. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the latest on Jayden Daniels and what it means for Washington season. We'll break it down next on Inside Coverage. Welcome back to Inside Coverage. Jayden Daniels, at this point, they are seeking additional options before deciding on what to do with him when it comes to putting him on injury reserve. The Commanders are going to meet today to discuss their plans. And C-Rob, this is just sort of the worst-case scenario and what's already become a worst-case scenario. I want to credit you because about a year ago, you and I were working together on this show. And one thing you said at the time was that when you talked to people around the Commanders organization, even they understood they were playing so far ahead of their skis because Jayden was so good, right? And I think about that all the time when I thought about coming into this season, the expectations for this Washington team. I think that's probably why a lot of us thought they'd take a small step back. But on top of taking the step back that they were going to take anyway, the injuries to Jayden that have piled up this year has really turned this into one of the more disappointing seasons in recent Commanders' memory.
Yeah, and I think back to, training camp and visiting with the Commanders, and I was sitting with a member of their brain trust, and we were kind of, just shooting it and talking about different guys in the roster. And I said, I don't know, man, I think going to the NFC Championship game might not be a positive for you guys. And I just remember the look he gave me. Like, it was just total disdain. And I'm like, look, let me explain, myself here. You went to the NFC Championship game. That now becomes the standard. That's the thing you now have to take a step forward from. Well, a step forward is the Super Bowl, and you were already playing way ahead of the schedule, way ahead of your curve in 2024. Unfortunately, fans don't sit there and look at that and think, well, man, we were just so far ahead of ourselves in 2024. Let's temper expectations. No, you think like, we're good. We're good to go. We're not going to think about the fact that there's so many old players on this roster, and there's so many holes, and then the what if Jayden doesn't stay healthy over the course of the entire season, because he got banged up also in 2024. So, I just keep thinking about that conversation. Well, now here we are with Jayden. They're going to have this meeting today to discuss, other medical evaluations of his dislocated left elbow, kind of what the opportunities or the options are that they have on the table moving forward. They're 3-6. To me, I look at this and it's, you don't want to live in the RG3 world, right? You don't want to focus everybody through RG3. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, you're 3-6. Maybe it's best to just shut him down for the rest of the season. He's been banged up over the course of the season. Yes, he needs reps as a quarterback. I would be more concerned with erring 1,000% on making sure he is absolutely as healthy as he can possibly be. And I would be scared, regardless of what the medical opinions are, of putting him back onto a football field over the next 2 months with that left elbow having been surgically repaired, because every single time he gets hit and he goes to fall, what is he going to do? What does any player normally do? You stick your non-throwing arm as a quarterback, you put it out there to try and brace yourself as you fall. He's going to fall on that elbow again. He's going to use it to brace himself again. When he's running and someone's going to tackle him, what do you do as a runner? You try to stiff arm someone with your non-dominant hand. I just think it's such a gamble. It's such a risk to try and put him back out there in a season where you're not 6-3, you're 3-6. On Jayden Daniels being here for the next 10 years and don't worry about the next 10 weeks.
Part of that, too, is you got to look in the mirror, know where you are and who you are as a team. Part of what I give the Jets credit for this week is they looked in the mirror and realized this is a longer rebuild, right? Like, you got to look in the mirror at 3-6 and got to acknowledge some of the weaknesses in your team and then look at what's coming, because you got the Lions this week. You still have the Broncos left on your schedule. You still have to go to Minnesota on your schedule, and you still have 2 games against the Eagles. C-Rob, at best, if you want to make the playoffs, you can afford one more loss this season. At best, it's going to take 10-7, 9-8 to get in, right? Right. So it would be tough to run the rest of the schedule with Jayden in. With Jayden missing some games, and inevitably he's going to miss some, you have absolutely no wiggle room. So you're right. I think the only thing you can do at this point is just realize, hey, let's live to see another day. Let's live to fight another fight, and that fight's going to be next season. It doesn't feel good, but I just think it's the inevitable portion of the process that the Commanders need to realize, is that this season just already went too far off the rails. Speaking of off the rails, before we get out of here, I have to get your thoughts on the most off the rails story I've seen in a long time. We have now found out that Tom Brady's new dog is a clone of his family's previous pet. They took some blood from his previous dog and they stored it and they waited, and now he let everybody know his company that he's also partially invested in has now cloned his dog. I don't know. See, Rob, I don't know. As a guy that has 2 dogs tattooed on my arm that I lost to old age, and I have their ashes in the tattoo. That was my way of trying to keep them with me. So, I understand the grief of losing an animal is absolutely, it's the worst for me. I understand that. Isn't it still kind of weird? You're looking down at the dog and I would know, Samantha's tattooed on my arm. That dog I'd be looking at would not be Samantha. I still have to grieve Samantha, and then that would be Samantha too? That just still, it feels very weird to me.
I don't know. I mean, even before even getting the dog thing, I'm like, come on, Tom, man, you played at a really high level until you're 45. Now you're doing stuff like cloning your dog. Look, you can't convince me that something wasn't going on during your playing career when you're out here cloning your dog and you were playing at 45 in a manner that no one ever played before. It just, science and Tom Brady have been good friends, it feels like, over the extent of Tom Brady's career. Look, that said, I'm with you. When Dawn and I got together, she brought 2 dogs into our relationship. I brought a cat, which is weird. That was a grown man with a cat.
We're going to talk about that.
We lost all 3 of them to old age. It was heartbreak for all 3 of them. Would never clone any of them because I think it's just, it's too confusing. You want to remember them for what they were and not confuse them with an animal that's not them, even if it looks like them. And one of the 2 dogs that she brought into the relationship was the purest of purebred Shih Tzus. It was white with the classic big colored spot on it. A Shih Tzu that is so purebred. We often see literally what looks like clones of this dog in Shih Tzu videos on Reels all the time. And a funny story, we were walking through the Louvre years ago, and there was a painting from the 1600s, and there was a Shih Tzu in it that looked exactly like her Shih Tzu. That's how purebred this dog is. And so he passed, his name was Bailey, and yet we still see him all the time on videos where people have these purebred Shih Tzus, and it looks like a carbon copy of him. And we've had the discussion, would we ever get another Shih Tzu that, is like a purebred that looks exactly like him? And we're just no, because he's him. We want to just keep that being what it was. And plus, I don't know, man, it just feels creepy to clone things. It just feels creepy to me to clone things.
And it's not like you don't still have to go through the grief process. You're 1,000% right. But I think often of the dogs that I've lost to old age, because like you'll see a mannerism in one of the dogs I have now, and you'll see a mannerism. It's like, oh man, that reminds me exactly of right. Those moments are connective, but like you never forget. Unfortunately, when you have to put dogs down, you never forget like those last days, those last moments. You still got to live through that. Like you're still gonna have to go through all of that, and then like what? Like the dog doesn't even have the same name, so it's a different name to a clone dog. So it just looks the same. It's just you got to look alike. You got to look alike.
What if the clone dog's a jerk? Right? What if you had this great dog and you clone him, and the next dog's like a total, and you're like, oh man, like now you got that confusing thing in your head where you got the, like you never know. They could have totally different, personalities, and does that now kind of and here's the thing too. I think about like if you have kids, like I don't know, man, isn't it confusing for kids too in a way where they're like, emotionally, I don't know. It's a lot, man. And it does not, I will say this though. If you've ever read the TB12 method and really gone down that rabbit hole, Tom Brady, I don't know. It's not that surprising that this is something Tom Brady would do.
Yeah, they always talk about how locker rooms are the most relatable, like inclusive, like everybody can learn about each other and everything. Like, I don't know that there's a less relatable human being in the world at this point than Tom Brady out there just cloning his dog and telling you about how to do it in non-invasive ways, though. Should point out, non-invasive, as he pointed out. So good to know. All right. Follow us on social media. You know the drill. At Charles Robinson, at Jason Fitz. Inside Coverage will be back tomorrow. Also, if you're just checking this out for the first time or checking me out for the first time, Yahoo Sports Daily every single morning on yahoosports.tv, wherever you get your free TV, and also across YouTube. So hang out with me there. In the meantime, come back tomorrow, rate, review, subscribe. You know the drill. We appreciate you listening. We'll see you tomorrow.